The gunshot echoed across the Montana plains as Penny Winters clutched her bleeding shoulder, her horse bolting in terror beneath her. The year was 1878, and she'd been foolish enough to think she could make the journey from Helena to Sweet Creek alone. Now, as she tumbled from her saddle onto the unforgiving earth, she knew she might die here, miles from anywhere, with only the vast sky as witness to her final moments. Consciousness faded in and out as the afternoon sun beat down upon her. When next she opened her eyes, a shadow fell across her face. A man on horseback, silhouetted against the setting sun, dismounted in one fluid motion and knelt beside her. "Madam, can you hear me?" His voice was deep, tinged with concern. Penny tried to focus on his face weathered by sun and wind, stubbled jaw, eyes the color of a summer storm. A cowboy, by the look of his worn leather chaps and dusty Stetson. "Outlaws," she managed to whisper. "3 of them. They took everything." "Don't you worry about that now," he said, carefully examining her wound. "I'm Isaac Blackwood. I've got a place about 2 miles east of here. Can you ride if I help you?" Penny nodded weakly. What choice did she have? With gentle hands, Isaac fashioned a makeshift bandage from his own shirt. He lifted her onto his horse with surprising ease, then mounted behind her. As they rode, Penny leaned back against his chest, finding unexpected comfort in the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "What brings a woman out here alone?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. "Desperation," she replied simply. By the time they reached his cabin, nestled against a ridge overlooking a winding creek, night had fallen. The modest homestead was illuminated by a lantern in the window, and Penny could make out a corral with several horses, a small barn, and what appeared to be a vegetable garden. It wasn't much, but it spoke of hard work and determination. Inside, Isaac helped her to a bed in the corner of the main room. The cabin was simple but clean, with a stone fireplace, wooden table with 2 chairs, and shelves lined with books more than she would have expected for a cowboy living alone on the frontier. "I need to properly tend that wound," he said, gathering supplies. "Those bandits did a fair job on you, but you're lucky. Bullet passed clean through." As he worked, Penny studied him. His hands were calloused but moved with surprising gentleness. He was older than she'd first thought, perhaps 35 to her 26, with streaks of silver at his temples. "Thank you," she said when he finished. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." "Just doing what any decent man would," he replied. "Rest now. We'll figure out what comes next in the morning." Morning came with the scent of coffee and bacon. Penny awoke to find Isaac cooking at the cast-iron stove. "How are you feeling?" he asked, setting a steaming cup on the small table beside the bed. "Like I've been shot," she attempted humor but winced as she tried to sit up. "Easy there," he cautioned, moving to help her. "You've lost blood and need time to heal." Over breakfast, he didn't pry, and Penny was grateful. But as the silence stretched between them, she felt she owed him some explanation. "I was heading to Sweet Creek," she finally said. "My sister lives there with her husband and children. I needed a fresh start." Isaac nodded, not pushing for more. "Sweet Creek's about 40 miles south. Once you're healed enough to travel, I can take you." "I couldn't ask that of you. You've already done too much." "Wouldn't be asking. I'm offering." His eyes met hers, steady and sincere. "Besides, I've got business in that direction myself." Penny doubted this, suspecting he was inventing a reason to help her, but she was in no position to refuse. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Isaac tended his horses and small herd of cattle during the day, while Penny gradually regained her strength. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, and Isaac would read aloud from one of his books, Dickens, Whitman, even Shakespeare. On the 5th day, when she was able to move about without assistance, Penny insisted on helping with dinner. "Been a while since this cabin's seen a woman's touch," Isaac commented as she arranged wildflowers in an old jar. "You live here alone?" she asked, though she'd seen no evidence of family. "Just me and the horses since my pa passed 3 years ago," he replied. "He and I worked this land together after the war. Before that, I rode with the cavalry." "The war changed everything," Penny said softly, memories surfacing unbidden. "That it did." Isaac watched her for a moment. "You lost someone, my husband Thomas, Auntie Edem." The pain had dulled over the years, but never truly disappeared. "We were married just 6 months when he left." Isaac nodded solemnly. "I'm sorry." That night, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the twilight, Penny realized she'd told Isaac more about herself in 5 days than she'd told anyone in years. There was something about his quiet strength that made her feel safe. "Those men who attacked you," Isaac said suddenly. "Would you recognize them again?" Penny tensed. "Yes. Why do you ask?" "There's been trouble in these parts. Stagecoach robberies, homesteads raided. Marshall and Helena's been trying to catch this gang for months." "You think it's the same men?" Description matches. 3 men, one with a scar across his cheek. Penny nodded, remembering the menacing face of the man who'd shot her. "They call him Scarface McCoy, him and his brothers. Mean as rattlesnakes, the lot of them." A chill ran through Penny despite the warm evening. "Will they come back for me?" Isaac's expression darkened. "Not if they value their lives." The next morning, Isaac announced he needed to ride into the nearest town for supplies. "It's a full day's journey there and back. Will you be all right on your own?" "I'll be fine," Penny assured him, though the thought of being alone made her uneasy. "I'm feeling much stronger." "There's a rifle over the door if you need it," he said, strapping on his gun belt. "But I don't expect trouble." After he left, Penny busied herself around the cabin. She found comfort in domestic tasks, sweeping the floor, washing the breakfast dishes, tending to the small garden. By midday, her shoulder was aching, so she rested in the rocking chair on the porch, watching the clouds drift across the vast Montana sky. The sound of approaching horses jolted her from a light doze. 3 riders appeared on the horizon, and instinct told her these weren't friendly visitors. Heart pounding, Penny hurried inside and grabbed the rifle from above the door. Through the window, she recognized the man with the scarred face, McCoy. They'd followed her trail, or perhaps it was just cruel coincidence that brought them here. Either way, she was alone and wounded, with only Isaac's rifle for protection. When they dismounted in the yard, Penny steadied her breathing and aimed the rifle through the partially open door. "I know you're in there, lady," called Scarface. "We've got unfinished business." "The business was finished when you shot me and took my horse and belongings," she called back, trying to keep her voice from trembling. "There's nothing more for you here." The men laughed. "Well now, that ain't entirely true," said one of the others. "See, we've learned you might be carrying something of value, something that belongs to a friend of ours." Penny's blood ran cold. They couldn't possibly know about the papers. She'd been so careful. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "Leave now or I start shooting." "A woman with spirit," Scarface chuckled. "I like that. But you're outnumbered, darlin'. Why don't you come on out and we can discuss this civilized-like?" "I'm not coming out and I'm not alone," she lied. "The owner of this ranch will be back any minute with his men." The outlaws exchanged glances, clearly uncertain. "Blackwood ain't got no men," said the youngest of the 3. "Just a solitary old cowboy." "Enough talk," snapped Scarface. "Burn her out." As one of the men reached for a torch, a shot rang out from the ridge behind the cabin. One of the outlaws cried out, clutching his arm, as Isaac's voice boomed across the yard. "Next one goes between your eyes, McCoy. Get off my land." Relief flooded through Penny as she saw Isaac on horseback at the tree line. Rifle raised, the outlaws scrambled for their horses. "This ain't over, Blackwood," Scarface shouted as they galloped away. Isaac rode down to the cabin, dismounting before his horse had fully stopped. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, striding toward her. "No," Penny said, lowering the rifle with shaking hands. "But they knew I was here. They said I had something that belonged to their friend." Isaac's expression darkened. "I heard. Come on, we need to get you somewhere safe. They'll be back, and with more men next time." As they hastily packed supplies, Penny hesitated. "Isaac, there's something I haven't told you." He paused, looking at her expectantly. "After Thomas died, I worked as a secretary for a man named Judge Crawford in St. Louis. I discovered he was taking bribes from a gang leader named Donovan to dismiss cases." She took a deep breath. "I have proof letters, financial records. I was taking them to the federal marshal in Helena when I was attacked." Understanding dawned on Isaac's face. "And these outlaws work for this Donovan?" Penny nodded. "I hid the papers in my boot. They're still there." Isaac ran a hand through his hair. "Well, that complicates things. But we'll figure it out." He checked his pocket watch. "We need to move. There's a place about 15 miles from here where we can hole up for the night. Old mining cabin, not comfortable but secure." They rode double on Isaac's horse, pushing hard until sunset. The abandoned cabin was crude but offered shelter and a defensible position on a hillside overlooking a steep ravine. As they settled in for the night, Isaac built a small fire in the stone hearth. "We'll head for Sweet Creek at first light," he said. "Your sister's place should be safe enough until we can get those papers to the proper authorities." "I'm sorry to have brought this trouble to your door," Penny said softly. Isaac shook his head. "Don't be. What you're doing takes courage, or foolishness," she replied with a rueful smile. "Judge Crawford warned me, said Donovan's reach was long. I didn't listen." "The world needs more fools like you then," Isaac said, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Standing up for what's right is never foolish." Something in his voice made Penny look at him more closely. "You sound like you speak from experience." Isaac was quiet for a long moment. "After the war, I saw too many men in power profiting from others' suffering. Tried to do something about it once. Didn't end well. What happened? I testified against a corrupt land commissioner. Week later, my wife and son were killed in a tragic accident." His voice was flat, but Penny could hear the pain beneath the words. "Isaac, I'm so sorry," she whispered, reaching for his hand. He squeezed her fingers briefly, then withdrew. "It was a long time ago. 8 years this summer." "Is that why you live alone, so far from town?" "Partly," he admitted. "Safer that way for everyone." They fell silent, each lost in memories of loves and lives destroyed. Eventually, exhaustion overcame them and they slept Isaac on the floor near the door, rifle at his side, Penny on a makeshift bed of blankets. Dawn broke clear and cold. They ate a quick breakfast of jerky and hardtack, then saddled up to continue their journey. The terrain grew more rugged as they traveled, forcing them to slow their pace. By midday, they reached a high ridge overlooking a vast valley. In the distance, Penny could make out a small settlement, a cluster of buildings beside a winding creek. "Sweet Creek," Isaac confirmed, following her gaze. "We should be there by nightfall." As they descended into the valley, Isaac suddenly reined in his horse. "Riders coming, 4 of them." He pointed to a dust cloud approaching from the east. "McCoy?" Penny asked, fear clutching at her chest. "Can't tell yet, but we shouldn't take chances." Isaac veered off the trail into a dense stand of pines. They dismounted and led the horse deeper into the trees, finding a small clearing where they could observe the trail without being seen. The riders passed below them 4 rough-looking men, heavily armed. Penny recognized Scarface McCoy at the lead. "They're between us and Sweet Creek," Isaac muttered. "Must have guessed where we're heading." "What do we do now?" Penny whispered. Isaac studied the terrain. "There's another way into town. Longer route follows the creek through the canyon. Tricky in places, but they won't expect that." They waited until the riders were well past before continuing, now following a barely visible game trail that wound along the base of a steep cliff. The going was slow and treacherous in places, with the path sometimes narrowing to barely the width of the horse. "My sister doesn't know I'm coming," Penny said as they navigated a particularly challenging stretch. "Her husband, Robert, runs the mercantile in Sweet Creek. They have 2 children." "Good people?" Isaac asked. "The best. Mary and I were all each other had after our parents died. She married Robert before the war. He was too old for the draft." Isaac nodded. "Family's important. You're lucky to have that." The wistfulness in his voice made Penny's heart ache for him. "What about your family, before the accident?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Sarah was strong, stubborn, would have liked you, I think, and James. He was 5, smart as a whip." He fell silent for a moment. "They were my whole world. You never thought to start again?" "Find someone new." Isaac's expression closed. "Some things you don't get second chances at." They rode in silence after that, each contemplating the losses that had shaped their lives. By late afternoon, the canyon opened into a broader valley, and Sweet Creek came into view, a small but thriving frontier town with a main street lined with wooden buildings, a church steeple rising above the rest. "We should wait until dark," Isaac suggested. "Enter town from the north, avoid the main street. Less chance of being spotted that way." Penny agreed, though she was anxious to reach Mary's home. They found a sheltered spot to rest and shared the last of their provisions. As twilight deepened into night, they approached the town cautiously. Isaac had been to Sweet Creek before and knew where the mercantile was located. They tied the horse behind the church and proceeded on foot, keeping to the shadows. The mercantile was dark, living quarters above. Isaac knocked softly on the back door. After a moment, a light appeared in an upstairs window and a man's voice called down, "Who's there?" "Robert, it's Penny, Penny Winters, Mary's sister." There was a moment of silence, then hurried footsteps on stairs. The door opened to reveal a tall, balding man with kind eyes widened in surprise. "Penny." "Good Lord." Behind him appeared a woman who could only be Mary, the same auburn hair and green eyes as Penny, though her face was rounder, softened by motherhood and a gentler life. "Penny." Mary pushed past her husband, enveloping her sister in a fierce embrace. "What on earth?" "Your letter said spring, not—" She pulled back, noticing Isaac and the state of Penny's travel-worn appearance. "What's happened? Are you in trouble?" "It's a long story," Penny said wearily. "This is Isaac Blackwood. He saved my life." "Isaac, my sister Mary and her husband Robert." They were ushered inside, up the stairs to the family's living quarters. 2 children, a boy of about 10 and a girl of 7, peered curiously from a bedroom doorway before being shooed back to bed. Over hot coffee and leftover stew, Penny explained everything: the evidence against Judge Crawford, the attack, Isaac's rescue, and now the pursuit by McCoy and his gang. "These are dangerous men," Isaac warned. "They know Penny's in Sweet Creek by now and they'll be watching the town." Robert looked grave. "The marshal here is a good man, but he's just one person. If these outlaws are as connected as you say, we need to get the evidence to Helena," Penny insisted. "To the federal authorities." "You need rest first," Mary said firmly. "Both of you. We'll figure this out in the morning." They were given separate rooms, Penny sharing with her niece, Isaac in a small guest room. Despite her exhaustion, Penny found sleep elusive. Too much had happened, and her mind raced with worry. What if she'd endangered Mary's family by coming here? Just before dawn, she heard movement downstairs. Slipping from bed, she found Isaac and Robert in quiet conversation in the kitchen. "What's happening?" she asked. Isaac looked up. "I'm going to scout the town, see if I can spot McCoy and his men." "I'll come with you." "No," Isaac said firmly. "You stay here where it's safe. This is my fight, Isaac, my responsibility. And mine now, too." His eyes held hers, intense and determined. "Please, Penny, trust me." Something in his gaze made her relent. "Be careful." After Isaac left, Penny helped Mary prepare breakfast for the children. The normalcy of the domestic scene, setting the table, frying eggs, listening to the children's excited chatter about having an aunt visit, felt surreal after the past week's events. Mid-morning, Isaac returned with troubling news. McCoy and his men are in town, staying at the saloon. And they're not alone, two more joined them this morning. They're watching the mercantile. "What do we do?" Mary asked, clutching her daughter protectively. "I sent a telegram to Marshal Caldwell in Helena," Isaac said. "He's a good man, someone I trust. But it'll take at least 3 days for him to get here with enough men." "We can't wait that long," Penny argued. "Every day we delay puts Mary's family at risk." Isaac nodded. "I've been thinking. The stage to Helena leaves tomorrow at noon, if we can get you on it with those papers." "They'll be watching the stage depot," Robert pointed out. "Yes, but they're looking for Penny and me together," Isaac said. "Not a married couple passing through town." Penny understood immediately. "A disguise. Robert's got a delivery wagon heading to the next town over tomorrow morning. You two could be hiding in the back, then circle around to catch the stage outside of town." The plan was risky but possible. They spent the day making preparations. Mary altered one of her dresses to fit Penny and found a bonnet that would help conceal her face. Robert provided Isaac with fresh clothes that changed his appearance from frontier cowboy to respectable townsman. That evening, as the children slept, the adults gathered in the kitchen to finalize details. The tension in the room was palpable. "If anything happens to me," Penny said quietly, "the papers are sewn into the lining of my boot. Make sure they reach Marshal Caldwell." "Nothing's going to happen to you," Isaac said firmly. "You can't guarantee that," she replied. "We both know the risks." Isaac's jaw tightened. "I won't let anything happen to you." "Why?" The question escaped before Penny could stop it. "Why risk your life for me for this? You've already done more than enough." "Because it's the right thing to do," he answered simply, but Penny sensed there was more. "That's not the only reason." Isaac looked away, then back at her, something vulnerable in his eyes. "No, it's not." Mary and Robert exchanged glances and discreetly left the room, giving them privacy. "Isaac," Penny began softly, "I'm grateful for everything you've done, but I can't—" "I know," he interrupted. "You don't need to explain. I understand what it's like to lose someone, to be afraid to care again." Penny felt tears threatening. "It's not just that. Thomas was everything to me. When he died, something in me died too, the part that could love freely without fear." She took a shaky breath. "And now, with all this danger, I can't risk it again, Isaac. I can't risk caring for someone I might lose." Isaac stepped closer, his voice low and intense. "Then I'll risk it for both of us." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Before Penny could respond, Isaac gently took her hand in his. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," he continued. "After Sarah and James died, I shut down that part of myself, built walls, lived alone. It was safer that way." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Then you came along, shot and half-conscious, and somehow found a way through those walls. Isaac, you don't have to say anything. I'm not asking for promises. All I'm asking is that you don't close the door on what might be once this is all over." Penny felt something shift inside her, a crack in the armor she'd built around her heart. "I don't know if I can be what you want," she whispered. I don't want you to be anything but who you are, he replied. Brave, stubborn, principled Penny Winters. Despite everything, she smiled at that. You forgot foolish. Never foolish, he said seriously. Just courageous enough to do what's right no matter the cost. Before she could respond, Robert appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. Someone's watching the store from across the street. Has been for the past hour. Isaac's demeanor instantly changed, alert and focused. How many? Just one that I can see, but where there's one. There are more nearby, Isaac finished. We need to move up our timeline, leave tonight instead of morning. The next hour was a flurry of activity as they prepared for an immediate departure. Robert hitched the wagon while Mary packed food and supplies. Isaac checked and loaded his weapons, giving Penny a small derringer to hide in her pocket. Last resort, he told her. Hope you won't need it. By midnight, they were ready. The children remained asleep upstairs with Mary, while Robert prepared to create a diversion that would draw attention away from the back of the store. Penny embraced her sister tightly. I'm sorry to bring this trouble to you. You're my sister, Mary said fiercely. There's nothing to be sorry for. Just be safe and come back to us when this is over. She looked meaningfully at Isaac. Both of you. The plan was simple but dangerous. Robert would exit the front of the store, making a show of locking up and heading toward the saloon as if going for a late drink. When the watcher followed him, Isaac and Penny would slip out the back into the waiting wagon. From the upstairs window, they watched Robert leave, making a deliberate show of checking the door twice. The figure across the street stirred, then began to follow at a distance. Now, Isaac whispered, taking Penny's hand. They crept down the back stairs and out the rear door. The wagon waited in the shadows, covered with a tarp. They climbed in among crates of merchandise, and Isaac pulled the tarp over them. Minutes that felt like hours passed before Robert returned. Without a word, he climbed onto the driver's seat and set the wagon in motion, moving slowly to avoid drawing attention. They had traveled perhaps half a mile when the sound of approaching riders reached them. Robert increased their pace, but the wagon was heavy and slow. They've spotted us, Isaac muttered, peering through a gap in the tarp. 4 riders coming fast. Penny's heart hammered in her chest. What do we do? When I say jump, we jump, Isaac replied, checking his revolver. Robert will keep going, lead them away if he can. We'll make for the trees. The riders were closing in, shouting for Robert to stop. When they were almost upon the wagon, Isaac grabbed Penny's hand. Now! They tumbled from the back of the moving wagon, hitting the ground hard and rolling into the ditch beside the road. Isaac pulled Penny into the brush as 3 of the riders thundered past, focused on the wagon. But the 4th reined in, scanning the roadside. This way, Isaac whispered, leading Penny deeper into the underbrush. Behind them, a voice called out. They jumped off. They're in the trees. Isaac and Penny ran, crashing through the forest, branches whipping at their faces. The sound of pursuit followed a horse forcing its way through the undergrowth, a man cursing as branches caught him. There's a creek ahead, Isaac panted, if we can reach it. The creek appeared, moonlight glinting off its surface. Without hesitation, they splashed across, the cold water rising to their knees. On the far bank, Isaac pulled Penny into a dense thicket of willows. They huddled there, scarcely breathing, as their pursuer reached the creek. The man dismounted, scanning the banks for signs of their crossing. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed he was looking directly at their hiding place. Then, a whistle sounded from the distance, his companions calling. With a final suspicious glance, he remounted and rode away. We need to keep moving, Isaac whispered once the sounds had faded. They'll be back with more men once they realize the wagon was a decoy. Where will we go? Penny asked, shivering from both cold and fear. We can't go back to town. I know a place, Isaac replied. Old trapper's cabin about 5 miles from here. We can hole up there until tomorrow night, then try for the stage. The journey through the dark forest was arduous. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every sound a pursuer. By the time they reached the cabin, little more than a crude shelter of logs with a dirt floor, Penny was exhausted beyond measure. Inside, Isaac quickly built a small fire, careful to keep it low so the smoke wouldn't give away their position. As warmth gradually filled the space, Penny sank onto a rough bench, her limbs leaden with fatigue. "You should try to sleep," Isaac said, offering her his coat for a pillow. "I'll keep watch. What about you?" "I'll be fine." He checked his revolver again, then moved to the small window, peering out into the night. Despite her exhaustion, Penny found it hard to surrender to sleep with so much unresolved between them. "Isaac," she said softly, "what you said earlier about risking enough for both of us." He turned from the window, his face half in shadow. "I meant it." "I know," she whispered. "That's what scares me." Isaac crossed to kneel beside her, taking her hand in his. "What are you afraid of, Penny, really?" "That I'll lose you too," she admitted, the words painful to speak aloud. "That I'll open my heart again only to have it shattered." "Life offers no guarantees," he said gently. "Not for any of us. But is it better to never love at all, to keep yourself locked away?" "Is that what you did after Sarah and James died?" "Yes," he acknowledged. "And it was the loneliest existence imaginable. Until you." Penny studied his face in the firelight, the strength there, but also the tenderness. When had this man, this stranger who'd rescued her, become so important? "I'm not asking for forever right now," Isaac continued. "Just for you to be open to possibilities, to not shut the door before we've even had a chance to see what might be." Something broke loose inside Penny, a wall crumbling after standing firm for so long. She reached up to touch his face, fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I'm afraid," she whispered, "but maybe it's time to be brave in a different way." Isaac turned his face to press a kiss into her palm, the gesture so tender it brought tears to her eyes. Then he moved back to the window. "Rest now, tomorrow will come soon enough." Penny closed her eyes, and this time sleep came quickly, deep and dreamless. Morning brought a new clarity. They shared the food Mary had packed, speaking little but with a new understanding between them. The immediate task was survival and completing their mission, but both were aware that something fundamental had shifted. Isaac outlined his plan. "We'll wait until nightfall, then circle around to Willow Creek Station. It's the first stop for the Helena stage after Sweet Creek. If we can get there undetected, we can board tomorrow morning." "Will McCoy's men be watching there too?" "Possibly, but they'll be stretched thin trying to cover both towns and the roads between. It's our best chance." They spent the day in careful preparation and watchful waiting. Isaac taught Penny how to use the derringer properly, though he hoped she wouldn't need it. They took turns keeping watch, alert for any sign of pursuit. As dusk approached, Isaac grew more tense. "We should leave soon. It's about 8 miles to Willow Creek. Rough country, but that works in our favor, harder to track us." Before they departed, Penny removed the papers from her boot and studied them one last time, damning evidence of corruption that had cost her so much. She thought of Judge Crawford's smug face when he discovered her copying his private correspondence, his threats when she refused to be silenced. "These were worth dying for once," she said quietly. "I'm not sure they still are." Isaac looked at her questioningly. "I was so consumed with bringing Crawford to justice," she explained. "It felt like the only thing that mattered. Now—" She glanced at Isaac. "Now I'm not so sure. Justice matters," Isaac said, "but so does living to see it done." He held out his hand. "Ready." Penny tucked the papers back into her boot and took his hand. "Ready." The journey to Willow Creek Station was arduous, following game trails and creek beds to avoid leaving an obvious track. The moon was their only light, occasionally disappearing behind clouds and leaving them in total darkness. Near midnight, they crested a ridge and saw lights in the distance. The small settlement of Willow Creek, little more than a stage station, saloon, and a few scattered buildings. "We'll approach from the north," Isaac whispered. "Less chance of being seen that way." As they descended toward the station, a twig snapped in the darkness behind them. Isaac whirled, drawing his revolver in one fluid motion. "That's far enough," came a voice from the shadows. Scarface McCoy stepped into a patch of moonlight, rifle aimed at Isaac's chest. Two more men emerged from the trees, weapons drawn. "Drop the gun, Blackwood," McCoy ordered. "Nice and easy." Isaac hesitated, calculating odds that Penny knew were desperately against them. "Do it," McCoy barked, "or the lady gets a bullet first." Slowly, Isaac placed his revolver on the ground. "The papers, Miss Winters," McCoy said, turning his attention to Penny. "Hand 'em over and maybe we let you live." "They're not here," Penny lied. "They're already on their way to Helena with the marshal." McCoy's scarred face twisted in a cruel smile. "Now why don't I believe that? Search them," he ordered his men. One of the outlaws approached Penny, roughly patting down her clothing. When he reached her boots, he paused, feeling the stiffness of the hidden papers. "Boss," I think whatever he was about to say was cut off by Isaac's sudden movement. In one explosive burst, he tackled the man searching Penny, driving him to the ground. "Run!" he shouted to Penny. Gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes lighting the darkness. Penny hesitated only a moment before running, heart pounding as bullets whizzed past her. Behind her, she heard the sounds of struggle, grunts, curses, the dull thud of fists hitting flesh. She didn't get far before strong hands grabbed her from behind. "Got her, McCoy!" shouted one of the outlaws, dragging her back toward the fight. The scene that greeted her was chaotic. Isaac and McCoy were locked in brutal combat, while one outlaw lay motionless on the ground nearby. The third man trained his gun on the fight, unable to shoot for fear of hitting his boss. "Isaac!" Penny screamed as McCoy landed a vicious blow to his jaw. The distraction cost Isaac. McCoy seized the opportunity to pull a knife from his boot, the blade glinting in the moonlight as he lunged. Isaac twisted away, but not quickly enough to avoid the knife entirely. He gasped as the blade sliced across his ribs. Something inside Penny snapped. With strength born of desperation, she stomped hard on her captor's foot, then drove her elbow into his stomach. As he doubled over, she remembered the derringer in her pocket. She pulled it out and fired without hesitation. The small gun made a surprisingly loud report in the night air. Her captor staggered back, clutching his shoulder. The third outlaw swung his rifle toward her, but before he could fire, another shot rang out, not from Penny's gun, but from the darkness beyond. The outlaw dropped, and two more shots followed in quick succession. McCoy jerked away from Isaac, a look of shock on his scarred face as red bloomed across his chest. He fell to his knees, then toppled forward. Silence descended, broken only by harsh breathing. From the trees emerged a tall figure in a marshal's coat, revolver still raised. "Marshal Caldwell," Isaac said, pressing a hand to his bleeding side. "Your timing is impeccable." "Got your telegram," the marshal replied. "Figured you might need backup sooner rather than later." He nodded at three deputies who materialized from the shadows, moving to secure the scene. Penny rushed to Isaac's side. "How badly are you hurt?" "Just a scratch," he grimaced, though the blood seeping between his fingers suggested otherwise. "Liar," she said softly, helping him sit. "Let me see." As she examined the wound, deep but not life-threatening, Marshal Caldwell approached. "Miss Winters, I understand you have some documents of interest to the federal authorities. Penny looked up at the tall lawman. Yes, evidence against Judge Crawford and his connection to Julian Donovan. Caldwell's eyebrows rose. We've been trying to build a case against Donovan for years. His operation stretches from St. Louis to San Francisco. Well, I hope this helps, Penny said, retrieving the papers from her boot and handing them over. The marshal examined them briefly, then nodded with satisfaction. This is exactly what we needed. You've done a brave thing, Miss Winters. Not brave, she said, looking at Isaac. Just couldn't live with the alternative. They were escorted to Willow Creek Station, where Isaac's wound was properly treated by the marshal's deputy, who had some medical training. By morning, word arrived that Robert had eluded the outlaws and returned safely to Sweet Creek. With McCoy dead and his gang captured or scattered, the immediate danger had passed. The stage to Helena departed at 10 o'clock, with Penny, Isaac, and Marshal Caldwell aboard. The journey passed uneventfully, though Isaac was clearly in pain despite his stoic demeanor. In Helena, Penny gave her formal statement to federal authorities. Judge Crawford was arrested the following day in St. Louis, and Julian Donovan went into hiding, his criminal enterprise crumbling as associates were rounded up across 3 territories. For 2 weeks, Isaac recuperated in a Helena boarding house, with Penny never far from his side. They spoke little of the future, focusing instead on his recovery and the legal proceedings surrounding Crawford's arrest. On a crisp autumn morning, with Isaac's wound finally healing well, they sat together in the boarding house garden. Golden leaves drifted around them, and the mountains in the distance were touched with early snow. The marshal offered me a job, Isaac said. Deputy U.S. Marshal, based here in Helena. Penny looked at him in surprise. Are you going to take it? I'm considering it, he replied, watching her face carefully. Depends on a few things. Such as whether I have a reason to stay in Helena. His eyes held hers. Or whether I have a reason to go elsewhere. Penny's heart quickened. And what reason might that be? You, he said simply. Wherever you decide to go, whatever you decide to do next, I'd like to be part of it, if you'll have me. A month ago, such words would have terrified her. Now they filled her with a quiet joy. The fear wasn't gone, perhaps it never would be entirely, but it no longer controlled her. I've been thinking about that, she said. Mary's invited us both to come back to Sweet Creek. Robert needs help with the mercantile, and there's talk of starting a proper school. They need a teacher. Is that what you want, to teach? Penny nodded. Before I married Thomas, that was my plan. It would be a new beginning, but also a return to who I was meant to be. Isaac took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm as he had that night in Mary's kitchen. Sweet Creek could use a deputy marshal too, I imagine. Is that a yes? Penny asked, hope rising in her chest. It's a yes to Sweet Creek, Isaac replied. But more importantly, it's a yes to you, Penny Winters, to us if that's what you want. Penny thought of how far they'd come from a wounded woman rescued on the plains to 2 people standing on the threshold of a new life together. The path had been dangerous, painful at times, but it had led them here, to this moment of choice. I was so afraid to risk my heart again, she said softly. But you were right. Some risks are worth taking. Isaac's smile was like sunrise breaking across the plains. Does that mean it means yes? Penny interrupted, leaning forward to place her hand against his cheek. Yes to Sweet Creek. Yes to us. Yes to risking it all again. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home to a home she hadn't known she was seeking until she found it. Spring came to Sweet Creek with a riot of wildflowers and the promise of new beginnings. The mercantile thrived under Robert's management, with Isaac's help on the business side proving invaluable. The school opened in what had once been an abandoned church, with Penny teaching 15 eager students ranging from 5 to 16 years old. Isaac received his official appointment as Deputy U.S. Marshal for the district, responsible for Sweet Creek and the surrounding area. The badge he wore with quiet pride represented not just law and order, but redemption, a second chance to protect others after failing to save his first family. They were married on a perfect June day beneath an arch of roses in Mary's garden. The entire town turned out to witness Judge Thompson, newly appointed after Crawford's removal, pronounce them husband and wife. When Isaac kissed his bride, the cheers were loud enough to startle birds from nearby trees. Their home, a sturdy cabin on the edge of town with a view of the creek, became a place of warmth and laughter. Isaac built bookshelves to house Penny's growing collection, and each evening they would read aloud to each other, continuing the tradition begun during her recovery at his ranch. Word of Marshal Blackwood's fairness and courage spread throughout the territory. Outlaws avoided Sweet Creek, knowing it to be well protected, while honest settlers were drawn to its reputation for safety and justice. Penny's school flourished, and she found deep satisfaction in shaping young minds. On warm days, she would move lessons outdoors, teaching not just reading and arithmetic, but also the names of birds and wildflowers, the stories written in cloud formations. The papers that had nearly cost them their lives led to Crawford's conviction, and eventually to Donovan's capture in California. Marshal Caldwell made a special trip to Sweet Creek to deliver the news personally, staying for dinner and regaling them with tales of the federal manhunt. "None of it would have been possible without your courage, Mrs. Blackwood," he told Penny as he prepared to leave. "The Justice Department sends its highest commendation." "It wasn't just me," Penny replied, her hand finding Isaac's. "I couldn't have done it alone." "The best justice is never served alone," Caldwell agreed with a knowing smile. "That's why I've always believed in partnerships." A year after their wedding, on another perfect June day, Penny placed Isaac's hand on her still flat stomach. "I have news," she whispered. The look that transformed his face, wonder, joy, and yes, a flicker of fear quickly mastered, was something she would remember all her days. "Are you certain?" he asked, voice husky with emotion. "The doctor confirmed it yesterday. By Christmas, we'll be 3 instead of 2. Isaac gathered her in his arms, holding her as if she were made of the most precious material on earth. "I never thought," he began, then stopped, overcome. "I know," she said, understanding all he couldn't say, the fear of loving and losing again. The risk they had both taken in opening their hearts. But here we are. That night, as moonlight spilled across their bed, Isaac placed a gentle hand on Penny's abdomen. "I was so locked in the past," he murmured, "so afraid of the future. You changed everything." "We changed each other," Penny corrected, covering his hand with hers. "Remember what you said that night, that you'd risk it for both of us." Isaac nodded, eyes bright with unshed tears. "You gave me the courage to risk loving again," she continued. "Now we're risking even more, bringing a new life into this world." "Are you afraid?" he asked softly. "Terrified," she admitted with a small laugh, "but in the best possible way." Isaac drew her close, his heartbeat steady against her cheek. "Then I'll be brave for both of us," he promised. "For all 3 of us." In December, as the first snow blanketed Sweet Creek in hushed white, Sarah Mary Blackwood entered the world with a lusty cry that spoke of strength and determination. She had her father's storm-gray eyes and her mother's auburn hair, a perfect blending of the two people who had risked everything for love. As Isaac placed their daughter in Penny's arms for the first time, the journey that had brought them together seemed at once miraculous and inevitable, a path marked by danger and loss, but leading ultimately to this moment of perfect joy. "She's beautiful," Isaac whispered, awestruck. Like her mother. Penny looked up at him, this man who had rescued her in more ways than one. She's our new beginning, she said. Our reward for being brave enough to risk our hearts again. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering all tracks of the past. Inside, a family born of courage and second chances welcomed the future, unafraid. 5 years later, on the porch of their expanded home, now a proper farmhouse with a picket fence and climbing roses, Penny watched her husband teaching their daughter to ride her pony in the meadow beyond the garden. Sarah's delighted laughter floated back to her on the summer breeze, along with Isaac's patient instructions. Beside them, 3-year-old Thomas James Blackwood attempted to mimic his sister from atop his father's shoulders, his chubby hands gripping Isaac's hat for balance. Mary joined Penny on the porch, handing her a glass of lemonade. "They're growing so fast," she observed, settling into the rocking chair beside her sister. "Too fast," Penny agreed with a smile. "Sometimes I can hardly believe this is my life. Are you happy, truly?" Mary asked, though she already knew the answer. Penny watched as Isaac swung Thomas down from his shoulders, the boy's squeal of delight merging with his sister's laughter. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," she replied. "Even with all the uncertainty, all the risks that come with loving so deeply." "That's the truest kind of happiness," Mary said wisely. "The kind that acknowledges the risk and chooses love anyway." As twilight descended, the family gathered around the dinner table. Isaac and Penny, Sarah and Thomas, Mary and Robert and their children. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and the comfortable interruptions of family life. Later, after the children were asleep and the house had quieted, Isaac and Penny stood together on the porch, watching stars appear one by one in the vast Montana sky. "You ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" Penny asked, leaning into her husband's embrace. "If those outlaws hadn't attacked me that day, if you hadn't found me," Isaac considered this. "I believe we would have found each other somehow," he said finally. "Some souls are meant to meet, no matter what path they take." "Such a romantic," Penny teased, though the idea resonated deeply with her. "Only with you," he replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Always with you." They stood in comfortable silence, listening to the creek's gentle murmur and the distant call of a night bird. The future stretched before them, uncertain as all futures must be, but rich with possibility and the promise of days spent together. "No regrets?" Isaac asked softly, echoing a question they had asked each other many times over the years. Penny turned in his arms to face him, finding in his eyes the same love that had given her the courage to risk her heart again. "Not one," she answered. "Every risk, every danger, every moment of fear, all of it was worth it to find this life with you." As he lowered his lips to hers, Penny knew with absolute certainty that some risks were not just worth taking, they were the very essence of a life fully lived. In choosing love despite its uncertainties, she and Isaac had found something rare and precious. A happiness built on courage, forged in adversity, and sustained by the daily choice to risk their hearts, again and again, for the reward of loving and being loved in return.